we often find that we're in a situation where data governance is, in theory, quite straightforward, but in practice is very difficult, and there's a lot of cultural issues that get in the way. And so, following on from our series of discussions around data governance, we thought it was really good to investigate in more detail the organisational change management aspects. So without much further ado, I'd like to hand over to Reid and Debbie, who are going to be our hosts for this evening.
Thanks, John. Thanks for that introduction. Hi, everyone. So as John said, you know, there's been a lot of recent sessions in the Data Management Association, especially in the Queensland ones, around data professionals and vendors' perspectives on implementing data governance. So today's session will focus on the change management for data governance success. And I think that's really critical because, as John was saying, it is, you know, theoretically it's not, doesn't seem so complicated, but then trying to implement that in a culture, in an organization, and manage that culturally and making sure it's sustainable in the long run is quite, you know, quite difficult and quite challenging. And I think we heard from a number of the members a few weeks ago, or 2 months ago really, around some of those challenges. And so I was actually on the transformation and masterclass, the masterclass in transformation and complex change with Reid. And Reid's got a very strong background in change. He's got experience across the public and private sectors. He's really passionate about harnessing the potential of change management, digital and data, to deliver better services for the community. And so I thought this would be a great opportunity, and Reid and I had been chatting previously about, you know, cross collaboration amongst the different disciplines and different associations, and how do we learn from each other. So that's why I thought it would be a great opportunity to invite Reid in to chat to us about this. So through his work, he's empowered and supported data, technology and business teams to create more change fit, data smart and digital enabled organisation. He works currently at the Australian Taxation Office, where his work is focused on change management for data and digital enabled products or projects. And earlier in his career, he worked as a consultant in public servants, including on initiatives such as Australia's National Digital Economy Policy and the Blueprint for Reform of Australian Government Administration. So he's also an active member of the Australian Transformation and Change Management community. So that includes being a volunteer on the Queensland Committee for the Change Management Institute, and also a member in the Australian Transformation and Turnaround Association. So I think without further ado, we will hand over to Reid. Take it away, Reid.
Thanks very much, Debbie. Thanks very much, John. Glad to be here and looking forward to discussing with everyone data governance and change management. This is the culmination, I would say, of many discussions Debbie and I have had about data governance and change management. And with Debbie's background and work on data topics, she's found so much of that, has had a really strong people focus. And for my work lately as a change manager, so many of my projects have had a really strong data component that we really think there's great opportunities to learn and share from each other. So that's what we're wanting to do tonight. Now, we are hoping to make great use of the chat facilities that we've got on Zoom. So please feel free to just say hi, say what your name is and what your interest is in this topic. We're interested to find out from everyone who's made the effort to connect with us tonight. What is your interest in the people side or the change side of data governance, and anything you're hoping to get out of the session? If you just write a short comment, if you're able to, in front of the computer. And yeah, interested to see what people are looking to cover. We are going to stick as one big group tonight, but please make use of the chat. And then if you want to use the raise hand function or type a comment in the chat, Debbie, John and I will keep an eye on that and look to reach out to some people who are typing comments throughout the conversation. So let's get into it then. Change management for data governance. So I wanted to start out with this quote, which some of you may have seen. In God we trust, all others must bring data. So I'm interested in this quote because I think it really shows that, one, in 2020, so many organizations are looking to make better use of data, and we're being held to a higher standard, no matter what our role is in organizations, to really justify the decisions that we're proposing with how we're using data. And I'm also interested in, from a change management perspective, how we can use data better to make better informed decisions about how we manage change. So I definitely think that change management has something to learn from data professionals here as well. It's definitely a two-way street. So why is change management important for data governance? Well, I think probably most people who've made the effort to come along to a discussion like this are familiar with why this is, and it wouldn't be new to people. So I'm aware of that, but I think the question of why is change management important for data governance is actually one which is quite a simple question, but it's really valuable and important to be able to answer that really well within your organization and in your role, whether that's as a data professional or a change manager, so that you can get the rest of the organization bought in to managing the people side of change for data projects really well. So I wanted to start with this question. And again, please feel free to use the chat and share your perspectives as we discuss about why change management is important for data governance.
So, and Reid, sorry, just to have a quick break in there, there's been a bit of activity on the chat. So some questions around how to engage senior managers and data people. And I think importantly, maintaining that engagement. We often find, new projects are fun, but how do you keep that momentum going? And also, how do you implement a new, new data governance framework for a department?
Thanks for that, Debbie. Thanks, Rick, Isabel, David, and Neil for your comments there. Yes, they are exactly the sort of questions that I have seen a lot. I've had a lot of those myself. So yes, we will try to, I'll come back to those as we go, and we will, yes, make sure we can cover as many of those as possible. So yeah, it seems lots of people with a focus on rolling out data governance frameworks, and also an interest in the launch or the rollout. So not just developing a framework, but then really rolling it out. So yes, we'll try to cover as much of that as we can. And also Rick's comment, yeah, engaging senior stakeholders and then maintaining their engagement, really important. So to set the scene then, we know data governance creates these different sorts of outputs. It might be a technical solution, an application, or infrastructure elements. There could be lots of artifacts, PowerPoint slides maybe that look not too dissimilar to these, strategy documents, principles, practices, processes. As a data governance professional, these are likely the sorts of things that you and your teams are creating. How do these things create value? Absolutely, some of them can, you can just create them and they automatically will create value if it's something that relies on a technical solution. Like if there is a software technology where people don't need to change anything about what they think, feel, or do, then that's great. However, what we find is that for data governance to create value for the organization, we need to look at the different roles that people have as users of the different outputs that you're creating. So this involves both the senior leadership and people from data focused roles who might be members of your governance bodies, making decisions about how data is used. It could be data owners in the business. It could be project managers on other IT projects, as well as, of course, operational teams or your organization's clients who are using your data and adding to your data. So for change management, we want to think about who are the different categories of stakeholders, who are the users of the different parts of your data governance framework, and what is it that we're seeking to change in terms of what they're doing, so that they can get the value out of those data governance outputs that you're creating. So what does change management research tell us? Well, I will say that I think in terms of research on data governance specifically, it would be valuable to do more focused specific research. So some of the information I'm sharing with you here is about projects generally from the ProSci research literature here. But I think it's still quite interesting and relevant because it really does show quite strong correlation between effective change management, by which they mean really focusing not just on, I guess, the people side, like the comms and training, but good project management, good senior leadership and sponsorship involvement, as well as that traditional people side of change. So in terms of making the case with your leadership team and with your stakeholders about why to take the change side of data projects seriously, there is some quite good research. Well, it's not perfect, and we want to do more research in this area. Definitely, you can make a strong case if we're serious about delivering the project on time and on budget, managing risks, and of course enabling the benefits. Then there's some pretty strong research that backs up that it's important to take these sorts of things seriously. So I guess to answer as best as I can why change management is important for data governance, like to set the scene here, it's that maximizing the benefits from data governance relies on people adopting and using it. And you know, we know that it's in the data management body of knowledge. We know it's important, but why is this still a challenge? That's what we're going to turn to next here. Some further good discussion in the comments here. I'm just having a bit of a look. Yes, culturally, it's challenging. So yes, seems a consensus so far that it's important and a challenge. So what specific types of challenges can we see? So in terms of the highest level of categories, the way I like to think about it is that when you have change management challenges on a data project, you can see that people are slower to adopt it. So if there's a new practice you want people to be following, a new system you want people to be using, a behavior to demonstrate, you might have some people adopt it initially, but that might then not be at the pace that you're wanting. So you're not getting to your target level of usage or adherence as quickly as you'd want. You might also make some good progress initially, but then stall. So you know, you might not seem like you can get above a certain level of usage or people following your data governance frameworks and principles. And thirdly, you might see that people are maybe trying, but mistakes are still being made. So you know, maybe people have all started using the new system or following the new way you've got of doing things, but there's still mistakes happening. There might be, you know, on the severe end of the spectrum, breaches happening. You might have cyber incidents or privacy and data ethics issues happening. That's, I guess, on the more severe end of the spectrum, but that can be about the not just whether or not people are doing data governance in the way that you've asked them to, but are they doing it with proficiency? So that's where change management is not just about what people are doing, but how they're doing it. So I have had a look.
Reid, sorry,
Debbie,
we've got another, just another question from Neil. Thanks, Neil. Seen too many data implementations fail with poor rollout. So always keen to hear how better change management can mitigate this. So I've just said to Neil, it would be great that you'll be talking through some of the techniques that can be helpful. It would also be great to know from the audience, you know, what they've tried and what has worked and not worked. I think you've got some of those questions coming up next.
Yes, so just to touch on that before I go to the content that's on the screen here, change managers, I would say, they're often very focused on adoption and usage. So if it's a new IT system, to keep it simple, like have people started using it and do they keep using it? To Neil's comment, I would say that the rollout and the go live and the preparations for that and how smoothly it runs is really important as well. And that's a different focus, but it is one that both project management is very interested in around business readiness and the go live. And of course, the business users are very interested in minimizing disruption to their own operations and to clients during the go live. And so that's where change management can play an important role as well. And we will definitely touch on some ways to have change management support the project and the business area through that go live. So in terms of specific challenges to be aware of, I think from a change management perspective, it can be really useful to categorize your risks or challenges to the people side of data governance and to the go live into the different categories of change objectives that change management talks about. So from the ProSci literature, they talk about awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And yeah, some of the things that people have touched on have definitely come up in the research that I've looked at. So there's a survey from a company that has identified some of these, and then some of these have also come from either my own experience from some of the materials Debbie and John shared with me from your previous conversations. And I think to set the scene about why it's useful to categorize some of the challenges or the risks that you see for your own data governance projects into these different change objectives is what we'll see is that the things you should do about them are going to vary depending on what they relate to. So for example, training is really important and valuable for a data governance project from a change management perspective, but training is not going to help you necessarily build desire. Similarly, people think of change management and they often go to communications. Communications, again, is really important. It can really help to build awareness, but if your problem is one that people don't have the ability or people don't feel like the need to take this seriously, given all of their other pressures, that's more of a reinforcement challenge. So communications is not necessarily going to be the right avenue to help you with building ability or building reinforcement. So that's where I think it can be useful to identify your challenges into these sorts of categories. I mean, I guess if I was to think of the number one change challenge I've seen in the past, it's kind of that, it's almost a cliche, not just for data projects, but for technology projects more broadly. And it's around getting the technology or the data and the business perspective joined up. So yeah, I think probably a root cause of a lot of these problems that you see manifest can be related to that.
It would be great to just hear from all the people on the call. Just name the top one challenge that you're facing, and we'll see if we get some consensus around what are we seeing. Is it a varied amount of challenges? Is it a specific type? So I've just typed the question in the chat window so people can just put their answer in what they're seeing as the number one challenge. Be good to get that quick view. Engagement with senior management, desire. Yeah, I think the why, selling the why this is important is critical. We often get that one. Turnover of staff, executive sponsors. Oh, that's a good one. Executive sponsorship, how you get that maintained. Gatekeepers. Who are the gatekeepers?
Yeah, definitely. Even sometimes to get this topic on the agenda, the right discussions can be a challenge. Understanding what's in it for me. Mm-hmm. Yes, these are all the sorts of things that we see. trying to get senior management to understand that data governance is more than just uplifting data quality, convincing there is a need. So yeah, it goes back to awareness and desire.
Often I find that's very tricky, especially when you don't have that sense of urgency. There's not that burning platform that needs to be fixed. I think that's when it becomes particularly challenging.
Competing priorities.
Yeah, that's another big one.
Investment in effort now for potential reward later, yes. All right, so yeah, feel free to keep adding and sharing challenges that you've seen or that you may see. We'll keep moving. So how can change management help you drive data governance success? So there's a bit on this slide here, but let me try to put it into perspective. And I think understanding this flow of data governance outputs through to benefits enabled and the role that change management can play, that can be helpful here. So yeah, John's also put there confusing data management with data governance. That's probably a topic I could do with all your help with. So yeah, if we think of these data governance outputs, and this is where, Debbie, John, others feel free to jump in and talk about the types of data governance or data management outputs where these issues are particularly important for you as practitioners. They're the outputs. We want to be able to show the causal link from those outputs through to benefits and understand and explain how change management can help you go from a project output or a framework or a practice through to the benefits that your organization really cares about right now. These top level benefits and understanding what they are and being able to articulate how your project really helps to drive these things, I've found that's the best way, or often one of the best ways, to really get on that senior leadership agenda and be able to get that at least the door open to those sponsorship conversations. And the way change management can help with achieving those end benefits, whatever they are for you, is through building awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, etc., which gives you adoption, usage, and proficiency of use of those data governance things. And the way change management does that is by understanding who's impacted and how, preparing for and managing change, and using change management activities such as communications, sponsorship, coaching, training, and things like that to really build that awareness, desire, and knowledge. If we go back to some of the comments people have shared around the challenges that you see, and a number of different ones there, but a lot of them are about that, getting that senior leadership buy-in, getting the senior leaders to back you up through being active and visible sponsors, and also getting that business buy-in. I think it's really about understanding those benefits and the what's in it for me, for them in their role at this time, noting everything else that's happening around them in the organization. So there I've got some pretty generic ones: increase revenue, reduce cost, improve compliance. I would encourage you, for your organization, for your initiative, to get much more specific about that. And at the highest level, maybe it is categories like that or similar. I mean, in the public service, often it's going to be different things, education, improving education outcomes, health, improving health outcomes. But you want to get even more specific than that for particular conversations that you're having. So as one example, as a change manager working on data projects, I've ahead of meeting with stakeholders, particularly senior stakeholders, often taken the time to have a look at their division plan or their branch plan, not just the corporate plan, but something a bit more specific to them, and seeing what is the outcomes that they're really trying to achieve in their role for this period, like this financial year, or whatever it may be. And then it helps you not just talk about change management in the generic sense, which can sound a bit a bit too plain, but really makes it personal to them. So that's some of the ways I've tried to position change management as a bit of the guide or partner for you to go from your outputs through to those benefits and get people to buy into that.
Reid, that's a great example. I wonder what you think of, having a stick and a carrot approach. So I think recently I've used a bit of scare tactics just because of the prevalence at the moment of, cyber security and cyber attacks and ransomware, and that's often just used as a decoy for criminals to steal data. So having that as a bit of an example, I've recently used the Optus case where they faced $40 million class action because they've lost, they accidentally published their customer details. So that wasn't even an attack. They actually published it themselves accidentally. So that's the thing. It can happen by without that awareness and the data governance and the models there. But those are some of the things that can go wrong. And often if your data is stolen, if a whole service switched off or stolen, and you've got to know what data was on there. Often people don't. So, just a common awareness about why you need a data catalog. Do you know what data you're holding? Do you know what's in it? Do you know what's the classification or sensitivity of that data? So that, I think, builds a case, because if you don't know that, how do you even adhere to the requirements around reportable data breaches? You can't even adhere to that requirement. So that's a bit of that's the stick or the fear factor. But using Reid's approach to get the business plans and try and connect it in with something really relevant as well, often quite hard to do in practice.
Yeah, I think you're right. The raising awareness of the risks of getting data governance wrong is definitely a good path to the C-suite, and that's really important as well as focusing on the benefits. I think it's like the flip side. Absolutely.
Thanks, Reid.
So I've touched on this point around, depending on what your change objectives are, that you would want to use different sorts of activities. And this is what ProSci suggests. Now, I think some of them you might say can also help achieve other things, but this is not a bad starting point, I've found. So if Debbie's point that you have issues or challenges around ability, sometimes training can probably help with that as well, I'm sure, but you might want to also think about coaching. So if people are trying to do the right thing but still having challenges, then maybe it's not a classroom training type of solution for that. Maybe it's about someone who's a data governance professional working with someone in the business to help them build their ability to fulfill their role. This is some of the different ways that these activities can help with different things. So I'm interested in people's comments. What have you found has worked well for you in your experience for managing change on data governance projects? So interested in your perspectives, what has worked well. We have had some good discussions already that have touched on this, but is there a particular type of activity you've found has been really helpful for building any of these particular change objectives? I'd encourage any comments that people are interested to share on that. Just having a look at the chat as well.
I think in our experience, we definitely have had the training, but it's interesting there that the coaching, is what's going to actually really sustain that ability. Because if people are trained and then they're not using it every day, I think that's when it becomes really hard to sustain. So that coaching part is something I don't think I've tried before, which is a good one.
Just as people are adding their comments here, I'll just have a look at a couple to share. Neil said it's always a challenge to assign theoretical monetary value to risk when comparing to the actual cost of data governance implementation. Yeah, that's something I've been thinking about lately for cyber as well, because cyber investments don't necessarily, increase sales or anything like that. If you're in a business, or they're not necessarily directly related to achieving a lot of public sector outcomes. But yeah, it is about working out how could you potentially use monetary value or a way of quantifying the potential impacts of getting it wrong. I think can be useful, but is definitely takes effort and can be challenging. Leveraging an issue that has gone public, yes, agree. Certainly lots of examples in the media at the moment, very topical. Brett said high-level support has been very effective, and yes, that's been my personal experience as well, is the senior sponsorship, active and visible support has been the most critical, and that is what the change management research finds as well, is the active, visible sponsorship is the number one thing that can help to achieve your project's success.
And Reid, when you do that, sorry, just before you move on to that next one, that senior sponsorship was, and engagement, do you often find that you need to prompt this senior leadership in terms of what you need them to do, and where you need them to be, and what you need them to say?
Yes, and now this can be a delicate topic for a number of reasons. It can include things like, obviously senior leaders have gotten to that position for a reason. They're not new to managing change. It's something they do every day. So I try to position it in terms of, being helpful, and also assume a certain level of knowledge on their part. But I think, yes, there are cases where you want to make it as easy as possible for them to successfully fulfill their role as a sponsor. So I think about doing things like being quite specific and saying, here are some of the ways that you could help this project be successful. And here's some ways that me as the change manager or the project manager or whoever it is, how we're going to support you to do those things. So it might be about you proposing to them specific governance meetings or committee meetings or places you want them to go and things you want them to say and do. And you can get pushback, like don't tell me how to do my job and those sorts of things. But I find that most people in positions of power would want to exercise it wisely, given the opportunity. And as a data governance professional, if you've got suggested ways that they can be a successful sponsor, then yeah, it can be about putting suggested actions in front of them and scheduling those things, preparing the materials for them. It sounds really basic, but you want to make it easy for them, I guess. Another comment on sponsorship is it's not just about one person. Often for, project accountability's sake, you want to have one person you can kick or one person with their name is just a single person accountable, which I understand that, but for data governance to be successful from a change perspective, it's not just about one senior leader. Often there's a data leader, there might be a technology leader or two, and of course multiple people in the business. So sponsorship really is about building that sponsorship coalition, I think. Some other really good comments here, being prepared to adapt your model, your data governance model. So I think that can be really important, taking feedback. I think when I've seen change management done poorly, often it's because you're just focused on these change management activities at the expense of listening to stakeholder feedback. And you don't want to treat resistance as a failing on the part of the user or on the part of the business. Sometimes if people have feedback or ideas, you want to take that on board. You want to, if people have been generous enough with their time to give you feedback, even if it's something they don't like, you want to listen to that and assume positive intent. And I think, as Neil says, be prepared to adapt your model to tap into any enthusiasm and to work out who are those people who might be the early adopters. You know, there could be a role model data steward, and you could maybe work with them, go a bit ahead of the rest of the organization, which that kind of picks up that point, I think, that came up in the earlier DAMA Queensland conversation about incremental rollouts often working quite well for these sorts of things. Another good comment from Lisa here, ensuring the changes are embedded into workflows and keeping it simple. So I would say the more you can embed good data governance practices into the workflows that people do as part of their day job, as part of the systems and things they already use, helps to keep it simple, and it actually reduces the amount of change management you will need to do. So I think that is a really good suggestion, and it's one where the better your data governance design and the better your solutions, it makes the change management job a lot easier. If you don't need to train, if you can avoid training someone in a classroom type of environment, I think often there's not to pick on training, but yeah, the more you can embed it into someone's job, the better. Comment from Rick as well, integrate data governance into existing business functions and forums rather than introducing what can be seen as a standalone framework that is an additional overhead. Avoid committees. I would say, yeah, interesting. You probably want to avoid committees, maybe avoid new ones if you don't need them, absolutely. Interested in other people's thoughts on this. I think you do want to avoid creating a parallel universe, but you do want to have something like, I'm not the expert on this, but a community of practice, or a place where the people who need to and want to go into more depth on some of these issues, you connect across the organization and get that group together. But in terms of your existing governance, yes, you don't want to create a disconnected way of having these conversations, definitely.
We've actually rebranded the the committee or community of practice too. We've called it the Data Governance Interest Group. So hopefully we'll see how it goes. It's all new, but hopefully we get enough interested people that it will, spread via that way and make it work. There'll obviously be people with designated roles, but just to kind of set the scene, as you say, no more committees, no more trying to integrate it in existing processes as much as possible. And there are many ways. I mean, information management policies, information security policies, they all exist. Records management, all of that. There's all avenues that these things can be incorporated in as part of the existing processes.
Yeah, I've found the same with change management, is trying to work out ways to embed change management into people's standard workflows and ways of doing their job. Because I think as we move from more waterfall, staggered big bang types of project delivery through to more iterative changes to systems and processes, the changes are smaller, they're more frequent. There's not necessarily this design, build, big launch type of delivery approach. There's more frequent changes. So the project-based approach to change is one that needs to be increasingly complemented through change is part of how we operate every day, and building it into the way business processes are managed. Yeah,
and Rick
so
just had another comment there, Reid, around recognising who does the work and incorporate into their job description. So I think that's what so often happens, is people get that additional role where they have to do this. It's not recognised, they're not measured on it, and it just falls away because it's not a priority. So I think that's an important one as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know if you've seen that happen or had experience with that, and increasing or changing job descriptions and capability frameworks and all that type of thing.
Yeah, so one interesting thing that our organisation has done is we do have all the sort of traditional public service capabilities for each job, like strategic thinking achieves results and all that. But we have added to those recently. So now each job and every single person's role does have a focus as well in their capabilities for their position on data smart, or how we use data and how that relates to our job, as well actually as being what we call change fit. And then there's a third new one around digital. So I think that's right. I think maybe I'll speak just for change management, but we can't look at change management as something that's just for change managers. And so that's how our organization has approached it, is to say every single person in the organization does have some capabilities appropriate to their role and their level that we want them to have, and we're going to define what those are, and we're going to support people to build that through having conversations with their boss and their team about that, training, coaching, all those sorts of things. And similarly, we have that for data. So of course, data professionals are going to have different required data capabilities and job descriptions that are a lot more rigorous standards that we need them to meet. But I think particularly in today's age and where we're headed, there is a data focus required for each job, and it can be helpful to define that and support people to build that. So I did want to touch again on sponsorship, which a number of people have raised, and yeah, the research really does back this up. So just wanted to make the point again that sponsorship is really important. What good sponsorship looks like is to actively and visibly participate throughout the project, build a coalition with their peers and with managers, and to really communicate directly, because I think if depends on each organization, but if the role models, if the senior people are treating something as important, then it's a really good signal to the rest of the organization. Just wanted to expand on the point around the coalition. I think this is really, really important. I've seen a number of projects earlier in my career where there's a new technology and there's someone who's the sponsor because they're maybe delivering that technology, maybe they're from the technology function. There's a business stakeholder who's their peer as the sponsor. But then there's often people who are users of the technology, or going to be users of the data from other parts of the organization as well, who maybe aren't in that chain of command of those two people. So I think on the business side, depends on your project or your data governance priorities and the organization, but your sponsorship coalition might need to be an army rather than just one or two people. And it absolutely does take time and effort, and there can be a lot of gatekeepers to go through. But you can approach that, building that sponsorship coalition, partly through going upwards to your main sponsor, whoever that is. Maybe it's the chief data officer or CIO, whoever that might be. I've also found that can be helpful to build the sponsorship coalition bottom up. So maybe if I'm a mid-level manager, if I can have a conversation with a peer, they can influence up as well to their boss and say, hey, we've been chatting with the data governance project team or function, whatever it may be. And it's, you want to give people an opportunity to not just to look good to their boss, although maybe there's a part of that, but to be the best team member for their boss as well. And that can be, I guess, a creative way of building that sponsorship coalition where it might not exist at the moment. So what does change management look like from a stage perspective? The sooner you can start thinking about and managing change, the better. So, ideally long before any kind of a go live or a big process change, you can think about how you're going to manage the change, which would be defining your change strategy, preparing a change team, which is not just the change manager, but how they're going to work with the project team, with the technical resources, and with other enablers like communications or training, defining that sponsorship model, then managing the change, and then sustaining the change. In organizations where a data governance initiative is rolled out as a project, sometimes the project team, particularly if it comprises external resources like consultants or contractors, that's going to be time limited. So you want to think about after the project phase, when the project might be wrapped up, who's going to really help you to sustain that change and how, because it's sometimes not until after that you might see an initial launch has gone well, but then people can revert to the old ways. So how can you really analyze and understand that feedback to adapt and learn and really sustain it into the future? Who can help to manage change? So I have made the point already that we don't want to think about change management as being something just for someone with change management in their job title, or for someone who's done some course. We need to build a change management coalition that involves sponsors, as we've talked about, key business process owners for your most important processes that you're looking to improve. Early adopters, someone mentioned in the chat, absolutely, they can really help you to learn what's going to work and what's not, and to help get others on board. Different types of technical resources. If you're using a technology as part of your data governance rollout, then there's no silver bullets. Vendors may not be able to have all the answers, but if you're rolling out something new, then they may have some lessons learned or some different things that you can help. You might be able to avoid creating your own training from scratch. Tap into them, as well as to peers in other organizations who have rolled out some of these things and what you can learn from that. Looking at the more change specific types of roles, depends on your organization as to whether or not you might have an internal change management team. If you don't, then, or even if you do, absolutely look to work with HR, communications, and those sorts of functions to really get the message out there, as well as do some of those things we talked about, including maybe putting some data governance related roles and responsibilities into the right sort of people's job descriptions. If anyone's got any other things that have worked well for them in terms of who to involve in managing change, very interested to hear about that as well. So getting towards the end of the content here that I had prepared. So just to wrap it up and reinforce that message that managing change for your data governance initiative can really help you to ensure your project goals are met. It is about driving adoption to help you get those people-dependent benefits that are tied back to what really is most important for your organization, whether that's revenue, costs, or compliance sort of improvements. But it is also about the go live, making it a smooth rollout if it's something which is being launched and you want to minimize those go live risks and have a smooth transition. And equally, if you're a data governance professional partnered up with someone who's in a project management role related to what you're working on, I've found a really good way to get their engagement can be to emphasize, if we can get people on board with this through good change management, we can minimize those delivery risks as well. Another good comment here from Lisa, records management and compliance officers and teams as being good people to work with as well. Absolutely. So that, I think, goes back to that point around the risk and the responsibilities for how data is managed. They can certainly help you in a practical way, as well as with getting that buy-in. So if we put it all together, and to recap, we know that data governance benefits can be highly people dependent, and that change management can help us to really drive that adoption and get those benefits from data governance initiatives. It can be really helpful to think about data governance and the challenges you might be facing, or what your objectives are in terms of awareness, desire, knowledge, and ability for the different users who you've got. And based on whatever your objectives are now for data governance, and who your user groups are, and which of those change objectives are most relevant right now, what change activities might be most useful at this point in time. You know, we're all busy, we're all in a resource constrained world, so I think it's helpful to think about it in this way. For any of my projects I'm working on from a change management perspective, through a combination of conversations with my stakeholders in the business, with my sponsors, as well as where I can, taking a data-based approach. So doing things like surveys, doing things like looking at usage statistics. You know, what data do we have to understand awareness, desire, knowledge, and ability? Is there some analytics or some reports that you can draw on to really understand that, not just in a gut feel or water cooler conversation sense, but really know, actually, people tell us that they're doing the right thing, but we can see they're not by looking at the data. And then based on that, think, okay, is this a situation where communications or training or sponsorship or coaching would help us? So that's how I have found works well for thinking where to start or what to do next, because as much as I would like to, there's not been too many projects I've worked on where, you know, I can do absolutely all of the communications I want, all of the training that I want, have a sponsor go to every stakeholder who I would like them to. So that's how I've found useful in thinking what to do next from a change management perspective. So that would be my encouragement to you all, is to think about either based on the conversations you've had or your professional experience, or in an ideal world, supplemented by some data that you've got about how the change is going in your organization. What would be an action you could take to progress change management for your data governance initiatives? So yeah, that's the question you don't need to share, but that I wanted to pose. And yeah, following this conversation, that's what I'm going to go away and think about for myself as well, for all the different sorts of changes I'm involved with at the moment.
Well, you've given me a great idea, Reid, and that's to send out a survey using that ADCAR framework. So designing questions around each of those areas, that will clearly identify, you know, which areas you need to focus on, and then which activities you need to undertake depending on where the gaps are. So that's great, and that's something I haven't been exposed to or used before. So that will be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought that was a fantastic presentation. Thank you, and thank you to everyone for their input. We've had a lot of really great ideas that have come through, and everyone's sort of helping everyone else out. I think one of the key takeaways for me is that you've just got to start small. It's business as usual. You've got to start small, and it'll grow momentum. But it's getting that starting point, and it's the thin edge of the wedge to drive it up through. Anyone got any last comments? Thank you. Excellent. Well, thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Thanst, Reid. Thanks, John. Sorry.
Yes, Debbie, you're right. We've got another event. We should have a synopsis out for that by the end of the week. So looking forward to another event about the same time next month. Probably similar format at this stage, given where we are with COVID. Unlikely to meet face to face next month, but potentially later on in the year. Let's hope that we can do that again. So thank you everyone for participation, and thank you again, Reid and Debbie, for a really great topic. It was a great.
Thanks for having me, John. Thanks, Debbie, and thanks everyone for your comments and questions. You've really got me thinking. I'm gonna definitely go away and have a chat with some of the data professionals where I'm working at the moment. Thanks very much.
You know where to find us if you need some help.
Absolutely. See ya.
Okay, thanks so much.
See you, everyone. Thanks.
Bye.
Have a
Thanks,
pleasant evening.
everyone. Bye.